Welcome to the 72 podcast, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's an incredible privilege to find out what Jesus is up to discover that, uncover that, to talk about it, and join Jesus on his mission. In the previous couple of episodes, you've heard stories from Greg Finke and Dean Rostad, and it's been quite a delight to explore those and see what Jesus is up to. And today, I am sitting in the library with Matt and Marv Ziprick at Bethel Lutheran Church in Sherwood Park, Alberta, Canada, North America. And it's been a delight. I've had the privilege of knowing these gentlemen for quite a few years. Matt and I have had, we had yearly breakfasts for the longest time, and then a yearly coffee sometime in the middle. And we've been reconnecting recently, and both Marv and Matt have taught at CLBI, teaching biblical worldview, Proverbs. What else have you taught at CLBI, Marv?
Something about compassion and
Yeah, incarnational ministry and compassion. Yeah. And you've taught biblical worldview. What else have you taught there?
I think 1st and 2nd Peter.
Ooh.
One of the courses on movies and art.
Faith, film, and culture. Yeah.
Taught that with Lance.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
All these good classes that I missed. I sat in a little bit of your Proverbs. That was really quite delightful how you taught Proverbs 2 years ago, not this past year, but the year before. And then going through more ready than you know. You realize. Yeah. There's the book. Yeah. Pretty incredible. So, let's discover some stories. First, listeners may not know that you are a father and son team, and you've been working together for how many years here at Bethel? More than 2.
I've been here for 18.
I've been here for 33.
That's a few years.
Yep.
And so that's just incredible. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be father, son, and a long pastorate too. For you, 33 years. Those are quite rare nowadays. Yeah. What has the experience been like here at Bethel?
It's been a joy. It's been a challenge many times, not in team ministry, but a challenge as far as the congregation, some of the stages of life that the congregation has gone through. But part of the joy is seeing generations of people in the congregation having had the opportunity to officiate at baptisms and confirmations and weddings, and then baptisms of their children and funerals and so forth. And that's been a real joy to get the taste of the full spectrum of life of the of people. And then just a delight to have been the opportunity to serve with Matt. I've learned so many things from him. It's just he's got so many different gifts than I do, and that's been a real blessing.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was it like? Were you ordained here, Matt?
Yeah.
What was ordination like? His ordination like for you? What was that day like when he started?
That was just a high point. Ordination and installation both on the same Sunday. Yeah, and for you can talk about that, but that was a real blessing for me. And my mother-in-law, my wife's dad, he was a clergyman, and his father also is a clergyman. So this is the 3rd generation. And my mother-in-law was able to come from Louisiana for it, and she was part of the service, and that was a real delight. You can talk about that.
Wow, Matt. Yeah, what was like that for you?
Yeah,
Dad was there.
Yeah, it was a thrill. One of Papa's stoles, his red stole, is of course the one that I wore for ordination, and so it was fun to take pictures with Grammy after the service and have her on one side and have the stole around me, and so that's been a joy too. It's been such a blessing for me to learn from Dad. So much wisdom, and as he said, many different gifts. And some of those gifts, I don't think I could cultivate them just because I'm made differently. And so I've come to a recognition of that, and that's been, I think, a healthy thing. But yeah, 18 years, it's been a joy, and so many things have transitioned in those years. Approach to ministry, of course, just, if I did a checklist of the things that have transpired, with technology and people's approach to thinking about God and thinking about community and what does community look like and all those things, it's pretty vast when you start to look at it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
18 years is a long time to gather some stories, and 33 years is a really long time to gather stories and experiences and struggles and triumphs that people have gone through, and you've gotten to be a part of those. That's amazing. It's a real gift. So one of the things that's really important to us at CLBI is an understanding of discipleship. How do we disciple those who love Jesus, who want to follow him? And CLBI is a discipleship school. And discipleship is sometimes a real misnomer, for lack of a better word. We think we understand what it is. We have copious amounts of techniques in terms of imparting information. But discipleship is really on the forefront in this time in history, and much more poignant, I think, because of COVID and racial tensions right now, all kinds of things. What does discipleship look like? Joining Jesus on his mission, Greg Finke's stuff. You have been aware of that, or growing in that teaching for quite a number of years now. How did this adventure begin for you guys in terms of the connection with that idea of discipleship as joining Jesus on his mission? And when did that begin to be seated in how you guys lead this congregation?
Well, a number of years ago, Claire and I went to a gathering called the Pastoral Leadership Institute. It was in Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. And one of the people that was there was Greg Finke. He was one of the speakers. And I remember listening to him and just kind of really being intrigued with what he was saying. And somewhere along the way, I sat down with him and was able to visit. And so we made a bit of a connection that way. And then we'd been emailing a little bit for months, maybe if not even years. And I remember one night I was sending Claire, my wife, an email. And I sent this email, had a quote in it and something that had struck me. And I sent it to Claire, but I accidentally sent it to Greg instead of Claire. And so I
Those are the best.
Yeah. And so I said, Greg, I'm sorry. And I was really thankful I didn't say anything intimate or, And so for me, that was kind of one of those kingdom sightings, just in accidentally sending an email to the wrong person, which ended up being Greg. And so from there, we kind of built a bit of a deeper relationship. And then at some point we said, well, let's have Greg come on board here at Bethel and do some training for us, with us. He took many of our people through a training, and preached here a couple of times, just explaining what a missional group looks like and how to kind of restructure our thinking in terms of not having a missional program to just living missionally, seeing every aspect of your life as being a missionary. And I think that was refreshing for me. I think it was refreshing for people.
Do you have, take your time, and maybe Marv, you can share a little bit too, but a story of someone that experienced that refreshing, the switch in pressure from program and getting all the steps right, so to speak, where there was a sense of, refreshment for people in the congregation as well.
The person that I think I'll invite Dad to speak about is a delightful couple named Terry and Naomi. Yeah. Maybe you can, they're part of your missional group, so maybe you can share with how they digested that.
Well, I wasn't thinking of them first off. Okay. There was another couple that I was thinking of.
There's probably lots. Good, this is great.
The couple I'm thinking of are Rick and Bonnie. But they were simply, they were part of this first group that Becky and I were with. There was Terry and Naomi, Jonathan and Ruth, and Rick and Bonnie. We had 8 in our group, 4 couples, and they just became on fire. Wow. All 3 couples, and each of the 3, when we invited them, each of the 3 just simply, why would you invite us? Because many people and even still, some people think that becoming a part of a missional group, you have to study.
Right.
And you have to know a lot of Bible stuff. And Rick and Bonnie had really never been a part of a church at all. And she only started worshiping after Rick did, and Rick only started worshiping when I officiated at one of his friends' funerals. And so eventually Bonnie came along, and she thought, I don't want to be part of this group, a church group, a missional group. And along the way, she's opened up, and she is just a delightful lady, you know. I knew that before, but as she has experienced the working of God's Spirit and seeing it and become involved in it, was just delightful. But same with Terry and Naomi. Are you thinking of something specific with them?
Well, I think one of the stories I remember you sharing was that Naomi's first incline was that I don't want to be part of this group. I don't want to dress up. I don't want to go door to door. That's not my style.
Yeah.
And,
Have you heard about Jesus?
Yeah, and so just such a different approach, of course, you know, than all that.
And when people, when you meet and you're not studying something, you don't have to read something before you get there, and what's your interpretation of it, but then just to sit around and talk about how have you seen Jesus actively working, and where have you seen that. It's a delight to see people open up and how they experience that, and to have them talk about it. And
When was the first time that sort of landed? Because the concept, just even philosophically, let alone faith, spiritual based, seeing Jesus at work. Well, I can't see Jesus. Duh, he's in heaven, or if we're humanistic, he's in a grave somewhere. They stole it. Anyways, that's majoring in the minors. But when did that sort of click for people when they went, how can I find out what Jesus is up to? What discussion sort of led to, I saw Jesus in that, in the way that person bent down to help a child tie their shoe, for lack of a better story. And when somebody notices that could be Jesus up to something. When did that kind of make a switch, as opposed to tilted heads, this is a confusing question? Or maybe that happened really early. What was it that you kind of set the stage for that is a legitimate question?
I think you have to model it so that people can understand it. And I think you'd probably agree on that too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to tell stories.
Yes.
So that people realize, boy, this is something that I'm seeing all the time. I'm just not noticing it. And I think one of Greg's things is it's not that Jesus is inactive, it's that we're inattentive.
Yep.
But I think we have amnesia. I keep forgetting too that I'm seeing it, and I need to be reminded. And every time I get together in these groups and I hear other stories, I'm reminded once again, oh yeah, I'm seeing it. And I could do that too.
I can do that too.
So while I affirm that there's a click where you do realize, oh my goodness, I'm a fish in the water looking for the ocean. I'm already seeing it. Yeah. That's true. And at the very same time, we keep forgetting. So I think it's a journey for everybody.
I came across a quote in a storybook that Becky and I read at lunch just about every day. It's Count Your Blessings is the name of the book. It's not a Christian book per se, but one of the quotes in there recently that I saw was, you get to see what you're looking for. And so, if you're got the eyes of Jesus and you're looking for things, you begin to see those things, whereas before they were there, you just weren't focusing on them.
Yeah.
And they're all around. If I slow down enough and if I look with the right lens, with the right perspective.
Yes.
And Matt's good at that.
Slow down enough.
He's good at seeing that.
Yeah, he's good at seeing that. I agree. I love his stories about that.
Yeah. He's very good at that.
Yeah. How do you inspire people? Right now it's an interesting time because everybody's automatically slowed down. kind of wanting to rev up again. Everybody's itching. But how do you encourage people, and what kind of maybe barriers or roadblocks in terms of inviting and inspiring people to slow down, to pay attention to what is actually happening? How do you inspire people to do that when they got stuff to do? We all's got stuff to do.
I think putting a premium on story, and at least for me, when I hear stories, I just naturally gravitate to wanting to be a part of those kinds of things. So that's probably the drum I bang the most often, is trying to tell stories. Even for our Christmas Eve service, I remember we were using one of Greg's blogs, that the kingdom of God often looks like an interruption.
Yeah, that's
so he used so many stories from the Gospels. An interruption of a woman reaching out and touching his robe. So that's what does it for me. That inspires me. So I kind of default to trying to inspire others that way.
Yeah.
We have quite a number of people in the congregation that are making calls to the membership. And some of the people are hearing some interesting stories about how God is working in people's lives. A lot of people are in isolation. A lot of these people are seniors. They're homebound. They're isolated and so forth. And so if a listener, a caller is calling and is willing to listen, there are some unbelievable stories that about God at work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The surprise of that is shocking in a good way. Mm-hmm. That, I don't know, do you, and maybe God is shaping this in you, I make the assumption that there isn't exciting stories in a lot of people. And so if it doesn't come right away, then I'll move on or ask another question or share my story. The whole idea of beginning to learn what
Let me tell you about me.
Yes. I default to that pretty quickly in order to, inspire, because I'm the one to inspire people, aren't I? Yeah. So the challenge of getting ready for the surprise of the gold that's there. Yeah.
I was telling, when we have a staff meeting, Matt always has us go around, and in the staff meeting, one of the things he begins with saying, "Where have you seen Jesus at work?" And everybody gets an opportunity to talk about that. And one of the stories that, for me, that was recent was we were at our garden out there, and our whole family, we've got all 19 of us, head out to a garden at Jan and Morley's place. And one evening, Becky and I and one of our daughters were there, and Morley was saying that he just had his pacemaker replaced recently, and he started talking about that. And he said, how I knew that I needed to be replaced is that it's connected to the satellite, and the satellite let the hospital, the what's the name of the
Medical Alert or whatever?
At the U of A.
Okay.
At the U of A, the
Mazankowski
know that it needed to be replaced, and they phoned me and told me that it needed to be replaced. Well, then his wife went on to talk about that he's had 3 heart attacks and 4 times he's had the battery replaced. And then Morley says, it's always got me wondering, why me? Why me? Why has God allowed me to live and to keep on living? What's his purpose?
Yeah.
What does he want me to be doing?
So good.
And Morley, he's just a generous, warm fella. But instead of asking, why me? Why have I had heart attacks? Poor me. He's asking the other question. And you can see God at work in him. And Jesus is messing with him, and he's always got something for Morley. Morley's always got something to do. He sees purpose in it.
Yeah, generosity is such an extraordinary mark of the kingdom that affects things so profoundly.
Yeah, and his wife says, he's a miracle.
Yeah,
and they treat it as a miracle of God. And
I think it was Matt when I first heard the phrase, "How's Jesus messing with you?" And you used that, and I love that phrase, and I'm still learning how to use it. I often talk about, how's Jesus getting your attention right now? And then I'll say something like, I really like the phrase, how's Jesus messing with you? Isn't that cool? But I don't really use it as though Jesus is messing with me, because I don't know, that feels funny, yet I like it. Mm-hmm. I think I like it because it's cool. It intrigues me, but I'm moving into the place where I am recognizing the messing with. Mm-hmm. I want clear things that are easy to understand, as opposed to sometimes there's mess with Jesus messing with you. How has Jesus messed with you, and what did that look like? Because I'm trying to learn as well what this messing with me looks like.
Well, first of all, one of the key passages for me that speaks to me about what messing with looks like is the call of Samuel. You know, where he's hearing the Lord speak, but he doesn't.
What, Eli?
Yeah.
Shut up. Go back to sleep. I didn't call you. Yeah.
And if I was God, I'd be very clear cut. You know, it'd be
exactly.
You know, but there's something about God that allows us to be somewhat confused, to ask questions, to talk to somebody else for further input, for clarity. You know, and so for me, that's been helpful to just remember. You know, I think people are hearing Jesus all the time; they just don't know it. Yeah. And then we're invited to be Eli's. You know, to not necessarily give the answers, but to say, I think you're hearing God.
Yeah.
Maybe pay attention to this question, or have you considered, you know. So that's one thing. I think for me, Jesus is always messing with me in asking further questions. You know, that was a mark of Pentecost. You know, what does this mean?
Right.
So when the Spirit shows up, I think we're supposed to be a little bit confused.
Right.
Wondering what's going on, what direction we're supposed to take. And I think that's all. I always feel like I'm in that camp. I don't know what direction we're taking. So I hope that's part of the messing with, you know, just being curious as to what's next. What should I pay attention to?
What should I pay attention to? And so the messing with you gets you asking that when it's not clear. Yeah. So how's he messing with you right now? What kind of questions are you asking personally that he's shaping your life and faith and leadership and being a dad and a husband and a friend? What's something where he's messing with you, beginning to get your attention and shape something that's not completely known?
Things I feel like I'm being messed with is I'm curious as to what faith, church, and following Jesus will look like for my kids.
For your kids, yeah.
So I mean, I don't think I can even envision what that might be or mean. But for instance, my one son Zane, he's 7. I was putting him to bed a couple weeks ago, and he said to me, Dad, and he's very clear he wants to be a pastor and then possibly a magician, maybe a pastor and a magician at the same time. He's not sure yet.
Peterson talks about being a pastor poet.
Yeah,
somewhat close.
Could be bivocational, I don't know. So I was putting him to bed, and he said, Dad, when I'm a pastor, do you think the church, meaning Bethel, do you think the church will have a room where people can come to who don't believe in God? But the way he phrased it was,
wow.
What was the word he used? He used a really obscure word that I had no idea what he meant. But he said, "Do you think there'll be a room?" That's the follow-up. I asked him, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Do you think there'd be a room where people who can come that don't believe in God?" Then he said, "Well, maybe if they don't believe in God, they won't be coming anyway." But I thought it was just so beautiful that he was already thinking of people who've no longer believe in God to find faith again. You know. Because that's important to him, that people would find faith.
And to have space for that.
In the church building. Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Wow. You rock, Zane.
He does.
How about you, Marv? How's God messing with you right now?
Well, one of them is to follow up with, you know, we've got 11 grandchildren, 4 are in Matt's family. And we certainly, Becky and I, wonder, what is the world going to look like and what are they going to be faced with? And we regularly pray that they will be close to Jesus their whole life. Yeah. And, you know, that's a key thing. And but I guess for me personally also, where Jesus messes with me is at my age, one who could have retired 10, 11 years ago.
Pastors don't retire.
I regularly ask Jesus, what purpose do you still have for me? And I wonder about that, how long. I've always said, as long as God gives me health and strength, if the congregation wishes, I will certainly continue to serve. But Jesus, what are your plans?
What are your plans?
And the other thing that he messes with me is, I wonder about the future of the church. And I wonder about the necessity of this building.
Right.
Matt and I have talked about that sometimes, the building. You want to buy the building? We'll sell it to you.
Yeah.
To you today.
Sure, I think I got enough in my pocket here.
Because I think, we've talked about it. I think sometimes the building can become an anchor that holds you down. That I think the church is, in the future, going to be more of a movement than a facility. And
what gives you the sense of that? Because I think I feel that in my bones, in a sense. But what gives you the sense of that as you look back? And is that a grief thing, or is it grief plus excitement? Losing the historic nature of what this has meant in so many people's lives.
I think that the church needs to be more flexible and pliable, and like the first century church, the first 3 centuries.
Yeah. And
not as heavily invested in brick and mortar stuff. And that probably brick and mortar are going to always be a part of the church in some way, but not as heavily invested in it.
Yeah. What might we be missing that Jesus is up to?
Well, I think it was Brian Zond who said that Jesus came to take us from temple to table.
Oh.
And so I think that's an invitation that we're being given right now. So I think some people are doing that. For me, it's probably a reminder to think about those things, to not be so quick to move away from table. And I know, of course, we can do table here. Yeah.
And you've been learning how to do that in missional communities type table, if that's what you mean by table in part. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be one reflection.
Yeah. I think that, and I've enjoyed it, is that the church, we love fellowship.
Hanging out.
And people are missing that.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I would hope that that's not what we focus on. And you used a word, I think that is a word that we need to try to move toward, is community.
Right, yeah.
Versus fellowship.
Yeah.
Fellowship is, we've got a fellowship hour after church, and everybody likes to have coffee and donuts or whatever and visit with one another. Yeah. And we miss the new person who walks through the door for community, to welcome them and to include them. Yeah. And I would hope that whenever that is that we come back, that we do not quickly run back to where we were, or try to run back to where we were. That would be unfortunate.
Yeah, it would be. What would be something that we could pay attention to, how Jesus messes with us so that we don't miss that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think I shared with you, Ted, this one scene in the movie The Apostle Paul, where Luke goes into the prison to get some advice from Paul, the apostle, and hear the stories of Jesus, because he met him, in a vision, and had been following Jesus longer than I guess Luke had, and so Luke presents to him a question, and Paul says, Luke, I've gone to the right and Jesus has pushed me to the left. I've gone to the left and Jesus has pushed me to the right. So on one hand, I think I don't even know if I can anticipate what Jesus is going to do.
Right? Yeah.
But I mean, it's a good question, but I don't even pretend to know what that might look like.
I'm always fascinated when we walk through the gospel narratives, the way Jesus does get people's attention. For me, Luke 7 is just so prominent. Simon, can I tell you a story? And I love it because Simon in his head says, this man could not be a prophet. Yeah. And instead of, if I were Jesus, I would have punched Simon in the head, likely. You're a dork. You're missing the whole point. He says, Simon, can I tell you a story? And Jesus really wanted to get Simon's attention. He just didn't want to judge him and cast him aside because he was off. But it really kind of focused on the extraordinary nature of experiencing the depth of forgiveness and our love response that comes from that. And the woman at his feet showed the beauty of that. And I wonder, kind of like, what did Jesus say at Zacchaeus' house? We have no idea. What was Simon's response to that? We have no idea. What was the elder brother's response in the parable of lost sons? We have no idea. Why? And it just inspires us to wonder. Yeah. And that's what I've been thinking a lot about in terms of Jesus messing with us, getting our attention, inspired to wonder. Yeah. What are you curious about right now in the context of what the experience of church looks like, and you've talked about what will it be? What is Jesus up to? And kind of the sense of racial tensions in the world right now. What are you curious about in all that, and in your own lives? What are you curious about right now?
Some of the same stuff we've talked about. Yeah. I'm just wondering where the church is going.
Yeah.
And I think the more that we try to focus and keep the church as an institution, right. We're going to be in more difficulty. And Matt knows that as Bethel, we have never tried to be the voice piece of the institution.
Right, yeah.
Because I just don't think there's any future in that. And I think that I'm curious to see what's going to happen with institutions. In terms of racial stuff, we see the protest against institutions because institutions, there's all kinds of systematic problems within institutions. Whether institutions tend to live for themselves, not for the people. Whether it's a legal system, it's for the lawyers. Judicial system is for judges. Educational system is for the teachers. Medical system is for the professional medicals. People quite often, and the people that you're trying to serve have to fit into that. And the same is with the religious institution, is that we can exist for ourselves and not for the fields are white unto the harvest.
Yeah. And
so I'm interested to see, I'm curious where Jesus is moving us in terms of that stuff.
A follow-up question with that. How do you hold in tension then your love for Jesus' church and what has happened in the institution of the church, and yet being able to hold that loosely? How do you recognize the beauty of what God has been up to in the institution that can be overly protective of itself, and that's where it gets problematic, and how do you let go of that without letting go of the love for what Jesus has done and what Jesus is doing still, but the transition into a movement?
I think you got to keep on challenging the institution all the time. In the Old Testament, most of the prophets were peripheral.
Right.
They weren't the cult prophets on the inside that were yes people.
Yeah.
I think most good things in the church as an institution happen on the periphery, not in the hallowed walls of the synodical office.
Right, yes. Yeah.
And, that's, you run into troubles when you say that and do things that go contrary to that.
True.
But I don't know that that's where Jesus is working that much.
Right. Yeah.
And so
he may be trying to say, like Jesus to Simon the Pharisee, can I tell you a story? Yeah. And he's waiting for the response, maybe to institutional.
Yeah. Don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's really good, and I love what you say. So, in my sense, it's that that beautiful thing of making sure the periphery stories are told and honored. That's one thing that I marvel about Jesus. He honors people.
Yeah.
What you, Matt? What are you curious about?
I guess in terms of the racial disruption, I'm curious as to how people will allow Jesus to be a disruptor in their life. I was preaching just this past Sunday on the text, I did not come to bring peace to the earth, but a sword. And my nephews and nieces were listening to that, and my sister was saying that when they heard the reading, they first said, "What? Did Jesus really say that?" Mm-hmm. And so, I mean,
he's the Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
He couldn't have said that.
Yeah. So as you reflect on that, you realize that he wants to bring the real deal. He doesn't want to bring a fake peace, a facade peace.
Yeah.
So the sword, is that anything he'll sever and shape anything that doesn't something that we might have a connection to that doesn't bring the true thing, the real, an allegiance to something that would take us away from the kingdom of God. And that can be disruptive. That can be unsettling.
Yep.
But to stay curious about that and how the church responds to that, how people respond to that, I guess, is the better better
the people
comment.
of the community of the church,
Yeah.
the people of the yeah. How do we live in disruption?
I mean, I think a good start is to just stay near Jesus, because every time you think you've got it figured out, he'll 180 you, and
he'll mess with you.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess we've been reflecting a little bit as leadership here, with all the problems of the world. The racial tensions, poverty, economic setbacks, whatever problem there can be. I don't think we as a church have the program, and we don't want to have the program. But I think what we're trying to do it fits in line with missional groups. Stay near Jesus in the Gospels. Stay near Jesus in how you're looking at people, because we may not have the quick solution for any of these things. But if you're following Jesus, that in itself will bring beautiful fruit.
Yeah.
And the list of the fruit is right there in the scriptures.
We know it well.
Yeah.
We can say it really fast sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stay near Jesus. The beautiful simplicity of that. Yeah. What's one thing that you would love to speak to a young adult that desires to grow in faith and have significance and make a difference in the world? What's something about joining Jesus in his mission and seeing what Jesus is up to and allowing him to mess with you? What's something in that you would love to speak to young adults?
That it's an exciting journey, and that it's a lifelong journey. It's nothing that you ever graduate from.
Right.
You don't go to a college, you don't go to CLBI, a Bible school, you don't go to a seminary, you don't take a Bible class, and once you finish it, you're a disciple.
Right.
It's a journey, and it's a lifelong journey, but it's an exciting journey. Yeah. And, there's the old story about, when wagon trains were heading west from Kansas City, they said, choose your ruts carefully because you're going to be in them for till you till you get to the west. Yep. Too often as Christians, we've got in ruts, and discipleship is not about being in a rut. I don't think there's any one pattern for it.
Right.
And if discipleship looks different for Matt than it does for me. And as he grows older, it's going to change for him too. And it keeps on changing. As long as I stay with Jesus, it keeps on changing for me also. And so that's...
Yeah.
I think I'd reiterate some of the things that Dad just said. I think there's so much joy and beauty and things to be discovered with Jesus. Things we have not even thought of. And I think just an expansive, unfolding story. And so when we think of it that way, it's there are new things to see, new things to discover. I remember reading in a book years ago, and the author put forward the premise of, what if we still have 20,000 more years on this earth? And he said, if that's the case, then hey, we're still the early church.
Yeah. And wow.
So,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and so he said the things that we think about and the approaches that we take really do matter. The one comment that kind of came to my mind too is live your life in such a way that people want to know what you have to say more than you want to share it.
Holy, say that again. That's worth.
That's worth.
I know, right?
Live your life in such a way that people want to know what you have to share more than than you wanting to share it.
Wow. I think Jesus is messing with me right now. That's good. Because I so want to tell people things all the time. And no, they don't often want to listen. Sometimes they do. But yeah, that's really good. Well, bless you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out and discovering and uncovering. It's a real blessing. Yeah.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ted.
Yeah. Again, we were hanging out with Matt and Marv Ziprick, father and son pastoral team, joining Jesus on his mission. And if you have thoughts or questions or ideas or comments, email podcast@clbi.edu, and there's no question about it. Cullen will delightfully read those emails, and he'll probably respond to you too, because that's just what Cullen does. So thank you for joining us and listening to this third episode in this series 2 of Joining Jesus on His Mission, uncovering stories about what Jesus is up to. So good. Amen.
Thanks for listening to the 72 podcast, presented by CLBI. Stay up to date with the newest episodes and subscribe today. For more information, check out the72.ca or email us at podcast@clbi.edu. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, live as disciples and be the 72.